Tonight, you are going to sleep inside a house that is already awake without you. Before you open your eyes, before you decide whether you are warm enough to move or too comfortable to face the room beyond the blankets, somewhere in the corridor, a maid has already stepped softly past your door. Somewhere below, a cook has put water on the stove. Somewhere under the stairs, coal waits in black baskets for fireplaces that will soon be stirred back into duty. And somewhere on a silver tray, a glass, a cup, a folded note, or the faint promise of tea is being arranged with such care that it seems almost possible that wealth, in the Victorian age, was not money at all, but timing. It was the feeling that the day had begun on your behalf before your own mind had fully entered it. It was curtains that knew how to keep dawn waiting, carpets thick enough to hush an apology, and a room so carefully prepared that even your first breath of morning felt managed. From a distance, the Victorian millionaire looks loud. He looks like a caricature of abundance, all hats and horses and polished silver, and enough upholstered furniture to sink a modest ship. But from inside the house, the feeling is different. It is softer, stranger, more repetitive, more padded. The luxury is real. Certainly, the curtains are heavy, the linen is fine, the furniture is carved, the tea is poured by somebody whose entire morning may depend on the angle of the pot. Yet the true texture of this life is not noise, it is ceremony, 1,000 small rituals, each one performed so often that they begin to feel natural, even inevitable, even when they are plainly the opposite. Someone warms the room, someone carries the water, someone lays out the shirt, someone brushes yesterday from the boots, someone waits outside the door, so that you may seem to float from one comfortable moment into the next. The comfort is genuine, the effort is simply located elsewhere. So tonight, do not think of yourself as touring a mansion. Think of yourself as drifting into one. Think of the first pale light behind thick curtains. Think of a coal fire at the edge of the room, not lively now, only breathing. Think of a bed, large enough to feel faintly theatrical, set beneath a canopy with dim tassels and a quiet shadow of carved wood above. Think of the faint scent of lavender, folded into linen, beeswax into polished furniture, old wool into carpet, and the cool seam of English morning waiting patiently just beyond the warmth of the blankets. You do not yet need the names of every servant, the rules of every meal, or the origin of every pound in the family fortune. You only need the room. The room is enough to begin with. There is an odd tenderness in the way a rich Victorian bedroom introduces the day. The space is large, yes, but not always warm. Heat belongs to the fireplace and to the bed, not to the air itself. A millionaire can afford more blankets than a sensible person would know what to do with, and he can afford a fire to be kept low through the night, and a servant to see to it, and another servant to apologize if the room is not perfect by morning. Yet he still lives before the age of effortless comfort. The corners of the room stay cool, the window glass holds a faint winter breath. The slippers at the bedside matter because the floor really is cold. This is one of the small historical secrets of wealth in the 19th century. Money could soften life, it could not always modernize it, and that makes the first moments of waking unusually vivid. You stir beneath layered blankets and listen. Footsteps pass in the corridor, careful and practiced. Perhaps a distant door closes, perhaps there is the small metallic hush of tongues against a grate in another room. Perhaps somewhere lower in the house, a bell has already sounded, and a footman has started toward the front hall. The mansion is never entirely silent, only distributed. Its sounds are arranged by floor, by class, by responsibility. The private rooms above are quieter, the service rooms below are busier. Between them move the people whose job is to convert labor into the appearance of ease. You open your eyes into fabric and pale light. The ceiling, if you can see much of it, is decorative enough to suggest that someone in the family once believed even horizontal surfaces should aspire to grandeur. The bed curtains hold back most of the day, leaving the room in that slow gray between dream and duty. A chair waits nearby. A robe waits somewhere within reach. On a table may sit a watch, a brush, perhaps a flower in a narrow vase. Perhaps yesterday's book closed on the page where drowsiness won. Well, the linen under your hand is smooth in the way. Only very good linen can be smooth. Cool and crisp at first, then immediately human. You lie there a moment longer, because the first luxury of the day is not breakfast, or horses, or investments. It is the permission to delay your own beginning. Soon, there comes the almost knock at the door. The sound servants made when they needed to announce presence without disturbing importance. A maid enters, perhaps with water, perhaps with tea, perhaps with both, moving with that trained invisibility upper-class households prized so highly. She places the tray where it should go, offers the slightest acknowledgement, and recedes into the margin of the room. You may hardly look at her, not from cruelty exactly, but because the social machinery of the age has taught everyone how to keep intimacy disguised. She sees your bedroom before breakfast. She sees your half-awake face, your blankets, your unguarded stillness. And yet the ritual of service insists that none of this counts as closeness. That is one of the first strange truths of being rich in Victorian England. Your life is full of people, and full of privacy at the same time. You, attended constantly, but not necessarily known. You are served intimately, but not intimately loved. The house comes near your body every day through clothing, cleaning, food, hair, heat, and water. And still the rules of rank hold firm enough to keep the whole arrangement from appearing personal. Even now, as you sit up and let the cold air of the room touch your face, the household is already working around the fact of you, while carefully pretending not to notice that you have a body at all. For a moment, though, the body is all that matters. Your feet seek the slippers, your hand finds the glass. The tea, if it has arrived, is gentle and reassuring rather than exciting. A Victorian millionaire may own rail shares, townhouses, country acres, horses, paintings, and more buttons than any one person morally deserves. But at waking, he is still simply someone trying to negotiate the distance between bed and floor. The robe helps, the fire helps, the tray helps, the knowledge that the day has been structured in advance helps most of all. No one in this house expects you to improvise your own morning. That, perhaps, is the true privilege, the bathroom and dressing room. When you enter them, feel like a border crossing between sleep and significance. Water waits in porcelain. Towels are folded with such firmness, they appear to know their purpose better than most people. Bottles line a stand or a shelf in small obedient ranks. Scent, soap, oil, powder, brush, cream, tonic, and things whose exact use has long since been forgotten, but whose continued presence signals order. The Victorians liked their domestic rituals to feel civilized, and civilization in wealthy houses usually arrived in the form of containers. Bowls, basins, carafes, jars, cases, trays, boxes. Every necessity was given a vessel, and every vessel a place. Bathing itself is less private than a modern imagination would prefer. Even in a rich house, warm water is not a casual fact. It has been hauled or heated or coaxed into existence through pipes with opinions of their own. A bath may be available, but it does not fill itself politely and vanish afterward without consequence. The room hears it, the pipes hear it, the staff hears it. Somewhere, the kitchen has felt its effect. Somewhere, a maid has anticipated towels. Somewhere, a valet has judged the likely pace of your dressing accordingly. Cleanliness in this world is a group project with expensive fixtures. Still, the ritual can be very soothing. Steam rises in pale folds against the mirror. The basin holds warmth for a little while. Soap leaves a mild floral note in the air. A razor waits with ceremonial seriousness. Hairbrushes with silver backs catch the weak morning light. There is always the sense that someone has been here moments before, laying things straight, setting out what should be needed, clearing away what should not be seen. The room is ready before you are ready, and that feeling follows the rich through most of their lives. If you shave, it is done carefully, not because your face is unusually precious, but because the world waiting beyond the dressing room door expects signs of order. A wealthy Victorian face should seem looked after, but not labored over, composed but not vain, awake but not hurried. Hair must be brushed into cooperation, nails must be neat, hands must be clean. Because hands are among the few parts of the upper-class body the public sees often enough to judge. Rough hands imply work, tanned skin implies exposure, anything too natural implies insufficient distance from necessity. And then comes dressing, one of the great daily performances of the age. Linen first, smooth and cool, then shirt, then collar, then waistcoat, then trousers properly held, then coat, then cuffs, then tie or cravat or whatever arrangement of fabric and self-discipline the hour requires. Boots are brought into readiness by other hands, gloves wait nearby, a watch chain glints with quiet satisfaction. A valet assists not because you are helpless, but because wealth has reached a stage where self-sufficiency begins to look vaguely indecorous. Your body is turned into social proof, one fastening at a time. There is an absurdity to it, naturally, but it is an absorbent kind of absurdity, the sort that becomes almost cozy once repeated often enough. So many layers before breakfast. So much attention before the first piece of toast. So much care spent making a person look inevitable. Yet the rhythm of it can be calming. Button, smooth, brush, fasten, straighten, step back, inspect, adjust. A rich Victorian life moves on these little sequences. They make the day feel held together. They create the illusion that if the cuffs are right, and the collar is right, and the boots are right, then perhaps the life within them is right as well. By the time you leave the dressing room, you are no longer only awake. You are presentable, you are legible, you are ready to be seen by family, servants, guests, business contacts, and all the other spectators whose judgments accumulate around wealth like soot around city stone. But before the outer world begins in earnest, there is breakfast, that most domestic and yet most political of meals. Breakfast in a Victorian millionaire's house is not a scramble. It is a procession. The table waits before anyone does. Cups and saucers stand in order. Silver lies precisely where it ought to lie. Toast has been persuaded into racks. Tea waits in a pot with more self-respect than many cabinet ministers. Eggs, fish, bread, preserves, perhaps bacon, perhaps fruit, perhaps some other item whose presence owes as much to empire and logistics as to appetite, all gather under covers and on dishes with the quiet confidence of food that knows it will be served correctly. The room itself assists. Tall windows soften the morning. Curtains hold excess light in check. A fire at one end keeps the ceremony from becoming entirely arctic. You take your place, and immediately it becomes clear that breakfast is not simply the day's first meal. It is the first confirmation that the household remains in proper order. Who sits where? Who pours? Who speaks first? Which child is permitted downstairs? Which child is sent back to the nursery after being displayed briefly in brushed hair and polished shoes? Whether the patriarch is in a reflective mood or a financial one, whether the mother is serene or slightly sharpened by the season's visiting obligations, whether some letter received after dinner has changed the air around the marmalade. In a wealthy Victorian family, almost nothing is ever only itself. The conversation stays inside a narrow lane, because breakfast is too early for candor and too formal for chaos. Someone mentions weather. Someone asks after a relative's cough. Someone comments on a carriage seen the previous day. Paper may be unfolded. A market note may be mentioned. A small correction may be made to the younger generation's table posture. The family dog, if tolerated, maintains a more honest relationship to the occasion than anyone else in the room. It waits under the table with a theology of hope, convinced that gravity and boredom will eventually deliver it something edible. There is comfort here, though, tea steam rising in the cool room, the soft scrape of a chair, butter yielding to a knife, the low clink of porcelain, the sight of the same people in the same light at the same hour, day after day, week after week, year after year. Even upper-class distance has its own form of steadiness. These households often struggled with overt tenderness, but they were very good at repetition, and repetition can soothe a human being more than affection sometimes does. Yet beneath the calm lies a revelation that matters for the whole story. Wealth, in this world, is visible not only in abundance, but in choreography. Breakfast tastes of fish and tea and toast, yes, but it also tastes faintly of rank. A footman stands just far enough away. A maid re-enters at the right moment. A child is corrected without being publicly scolded. A cup is refilled before the request forms. The family remains at the center, while labor circles discreetly at the edges. This pattern will repeat all day in one form or another. When breakfast dissolves, it does not end so much as distribute itself into the rest of the house. Parents drift toward letters, newspapers, or morning visits. Children retreat to the upper floors and their separate kingdom of instruction. Servants sweep away the evidence of the meal until the room looks as though nothing sticky or human ever happened there. This is the moment when the mansion reveals its deeper nature. It is not a static monument, it is a machine of transformation, endlessly taking the untidy result of life and returning polished surfaces in its place. The butler is one of the machine's great visible gears. He moves with grave precision through hall, pantry, dining room, and drawing room, carrying keys, schedules, messages, and the kind of domestic authority that has no need to raise its voice. In another era, he might have been a steward, a clerk, perhaps even a priest of order. Here he is simply the butler, though simply is not quite the right word for a man who knows where the silver is locked, which wines are lying down, which guest must not be seated beside which cousin, and which member of the family is to be shielded from small embarrassments before luncheon. To wealth, he offers continuity. To the house, he offers memory. Parallel to him is the housekeeper, mistress of linen and routines, sovereign of cupboards, timings, and female staff. Her reign is quieter than his only because it penetrates further. She knows the condition of the sheets, the discipline of the maids, the state of the spare rooms, the scent of the holes, the cupboards where towels live, and the many tiny signs by which a house reveals whether it has been kept properly or merely expensively. The rich like to think good homes arose from good breeding, but in truth, they often arose from housekeepers with excellent standards. Below stairs is warmer, louder, and more honest. Kitchens do not pretend to elegance, they manufacture it. The cook operates inside heat, steam, chopping, boiling, stirring, tasting, and the endless negotiation between ambition and the practical limitations of time, weather, and supplies. A rich family may eat beautifully upstairs, because somewhere below, a woman has decided that sauces will not separate today, and that pastry will not fail. Scullery maids wash what others have used. Kitchen boys run what others have requested. Trays are assembled in a world the family seldom sees, and from which it benefits constantly. There are footmen, too, decorative and useful in roughly equal measure, who carry, announce, open, close, fetch and stand, with the impressive stillness expected of men whose height and shoulders have become part of the furniture of importance. There is the valet, who protects the master from the indignity of disorder. There may be a lady's maid on the female side of the family, guardian of hair, hooks, seams, ribbons, lace, and the daily translation of a woman into social appearance. There are nursery workers keeping children alive and civilized above. There are gardeners training hedges into obedience outside. There are stable staff who know more practical truths about the family's movements than anyone in the drawing room admits. Once you begin to notice all this, you understand something the grand rooms had concealed. The great Victorian house is not luxurious merely because it contains beauty. It is luxurious because it contains synchronized people. Every comfort has a human shadow. Every shining surface has a hand behind it. Every smooth transition in the family's day has been earned by someone else's earlier effort. If the wealthy are often tempted to believe their lives unfold naturally, the household itself knows better. Nothing about ease is natural. Ease is arranged, and yet, for the listener drifting towards sleep, the household is not only a lesson in class, it is also a lesson in rhythm. Hear the doors that open softly. Hear the brush against a coat sleeve. Hear the coal toms at a grate. Hear the distant kitchen clatter, muffled by walls and distance. Hear the gardener's wheelbarrow, somewhere beyond the back lawn. Hear the house itself breathing in layers. It is a strangely beautiful ecosystem, once the mind stops resisting its hierarchy and simply notices the movement. By late morning, the house begins to turn outward. The private rituals of waking and feeding give way to the public rituals of being seen. Clothing matters even more now, because whatever has been selected and brushed and fastened in the dressing room is about to enter the field of interpretation. Victorians read one another by appearance with extraordinary speed. Fabric, fit, polish, freshness, and restraint all told their tale before a single sentence had the chance. For a gentleman, the rules of dress suggest solidity, discretion, and the expensive ability to look unruffled. Dark coat, proper waistcoat, clean linen, well-kept boots, gloves, perhaps a walking stick, perhaps a hat chosen for the weather and the rank of the occasion. Nothing too flashy if one is truly secure, though true security often expresses itself through fabrics whose quality does not require explanation. For a lady, the matter is more elaborate. Dresses, corsetry, layers, hats, gloves, jewelry, hair color, and the whole complicated architecture of femininity within upper-class society must all combine to say that she is correct, fashionable, and not trying too hard, which may be the most exhausting visual statement in history. There is a sleepy intimacy in these preparations, too. The final brush at the shoulder, the careful buttoning of gloves, the smoothing of a skirt, the pin adjusted near a collar. The mirror glanced at not from vanity alone, but from self-defense. A rich Victorian family may own paintings, horses, and property, but what it truly carries into society is its own surface. The body becomes the household's most portable room. Then come the calls, those brief social visitations by which the upper world confirms its own existence. A carriage pulls up, a card is presented, a servant receives. A guest is either admitted or tactfully not. The room of reception matters tremendously. Light, upholstery, flowers, portraits, tea service, all of it works in concert to communicate taste, steadiness, and social legitimacy. One does not simply visit, one enters a carefully composed sentence about another family's position. Conversation in such rooms is light by design and heavy by implication. Weather, health, music, gardens, charities, travel, marriages in progress. Invitations proposed, invitations remembered, invitations omitted. Everything glides across the surface, but beneath the glide lies judgment. Who is newly rich? Who is suitably old? Who is acceptable? Who has become too visible? Who has married well? Who has married nervously? Who is said to be in trouble? Who is pretending not to be? The truly skilled move through this world as if it were effortless. The rest merely hope their teacup does not rattle. Tea itself deserves its own little hush. It enters the room like a sacrament of domestic power. Cups are passed, sugar is measured, cake is offered. Hands in gloves and hands without gloves perform small negotiations over plates, spoons, and portions. The clink of china is delicate enough to seem harmless, but entire alliances and aversions can pass beneath it. And still, there is comfort. There is always comfort somewhere in a Victorian ritual if you stay close enough to the objects. The steam at the lip of the cup, the softness of a chair, the filtered light through curtains, the tiny bright note of a spoon meeting porcelain. Society may be exhausting, but it is often upholstered. After calls come the quieter forms of management. Correspondence spreads over desks in cream, white, and pale blue. Envelopes wait, seals wait, pens are lifted, dipped, paused over, resumed. This is where wealthy life becomes paper. Invitations answered, debts acknowledged, charities thanked, agents instructed, relatives soothed, visits confirmed, accounts reviewed, and reputations maintained by handwriting. It is also where the family's relationship to money becomes most visible in its invisible way. Fortunes in the Victorian age were often wrapped in politeness. Land was mentioned more freely than trade. Investments were named more delicately than profits. Family standing could rest on railways, mills, shipping, colonial ventures, rents, mines, or inheritances. But by the time those facts reached the drawing room, they had usually been translated into softer language. That translation is part of upper-class survival. Money must not only exist, it must sound respectable. A family can be newly rich, but it does not wish to sound newly rich. It can be commercially successful, but it does not wish to sound commercial in the wrong rooms. So the desk becomes a theater of editing. What shall be said openly? What shall be implied? What shall be omitted under the generous shelter of the word circumstances? A Victorian millionaire does not merely possess wealth. He curates its tone. Marriage belongs partly to this paper world too. Courtship may look like flowers, opera boxes, carriage rides, glances, and the mild comedy of chaperones, but under the romance runs a quieter river of settlements, inheritance, alliances, and calculations. A suitable match strengthens land, name, influence, connection, respectability, and future prospects. An unsuitable one threatens to do the opposite. Families discuss affection, solicitors discuss terms. The two conversations do not always occur in the same room. None of this means feeling is absent. It only means feeling is supervised. Some couples grow genuinely close, some remain formally kind. Some discover that mutual politeness can resemble peace, if one does not inspect it too closely. Some drift apart into different wings of the same life. But the rich Victorian marriage, at least in the social imagination, is never just about two people. It is about continuity. It is about what families hope to secure by placing love, money, and inheritance in the same carefully decorated basket. By afternoon, the house changes tone again. The nursery and schoolroom begin to matter. Children in wealthy households are not exactly hidden, but they are managed in another register. They exist slightly above the main current of adult life, both physically and socially. Nannies, nurses, governesses, and tutors shape their days in rooms that are often plainer, brighter, and more practical than the formal spaces below. Toys exist, but so do copybooks. Walks exist, but so do lessons. Affection exists, but so does the expectation that a child of rank must learn to carry himself or herself as a future representative of the family name. When you enter the nursery, the air changes. It is less perfumed and more honest. More milk, soap, wool, ink, and nursery fire. Small shoes line up. Cloaks hang from pegs. A doll sits in a chair. A rocking horse faces the window with stoic patience. A child may be reciting a lesson. Another may be embroidering. Another may be staring dreamily out at the lawn while pretending to conjugate a verb. In these rooms, the family future is assembled a little more openly than in the drawing room, though still by delegated hands. The nanny is one of those delegated hands. She may be practical, affectionate, formidable, or all three. She knows the ordinary truths of the children better than almost anyone downstairs. She knows who cries when tired, who lies badly, who fears thunder, who hides crumbs, who likes the dog too much, who only pretends to dislike French. The governess, if there is one, lives in a more precarious social weather. Neither servant nor family, educated enough to teach and isolated enough to ache. She brings lessons, posture, pronunciation, and the slow civilizing machinery of upper-class childhood to bear on minds that may or may not wish to cooperate. Parents appear in this world in selected doses. They ask after progress, they inspect, they praise cautiously, they correct gently or not so gently. They kiss foreheads perhaps, or straighten a ribbon, or listen to a few minutes of piano before being summoned elsewhere. The rich Victorian household often loved its children through structure rather than constant presence. A child could be cherished and still spend most of the day in the orbit of hired adults. Wealth gave many things, it did not always give nearness. That is one of the melancholy truths hidden inside nursery lace and polished boots. The children are often dressed like promises. The eldest son especially carries the burden of continuation. He must inherit properly, study properly, behave properly, and one day turn into the next man at the head of the breakfast table. Daughters carry another form of expectation, one stitched through music, language, composure, charm, and eventually marriage. Yet beneath all this preparation remain ordinary children with ordinary wishes. They want the dog, the garden, the cake, the story, the walk, the extra 5 minutes by the fire. No amount of money erases the small rebellions and sleepy softnesses of childhood, and because the nursery can hold too much tenderness to remain entirely calm, the day often redirects itself into leisure. Garden doors open, shoes change, hats are chosen, dogs bark in hopeful loops. A path waits beyond the terrace, gravel neat, hedges trimmed into confidence, flower beds arranged in obedient geometry. The rich Victorian afternoon knows how to appear relaxed without entirely surrendering to idleness. It likes a walk with purpose, a game with rules, a chair placed artfully in dappled shade. Pets thrive in this atmosphere: lapdogs, terriers, spaniels, horses, aviary birds, sometimes peacocks if the family's confidence outruns its moderation. Animals in wealthy households receive not only affection, but accessories. A basket here, a blanket there, a groom's attention, a child's devotion, a portrait perhaps if the creature has survived long enough and charmingly enough to count as family. In a world so full of human performance, animals bring relief. They do not care who sits above the salt. They care who carries the biscuit. The garden itself is a slower room under the sky. Lawns stretch, shrubs behave. Roses, or ivy, or hothouse plants declare the reach of money through soil. Somewhere there is a head gardener who knows more about frost, drainage, and the family's illusions than anyone in the drawing room. There may be a conservatory warm as an indoor climate from another empire. There may be a gravel path skirting you, a bench under a tree, a view towards stables, perhaps a lake if one is in the country, or a square garden if one remains in town. To walk in such spaces is to feel the upper classes attempting to domesticate nature in the same way they domesticate meals, visits, and emotions. Croquet may appear, lawn tennis in a slightly later decade perhaps, archery in decorative clothes, reading under a tree, small talk stretched thin enough to become almost restful. A child runs across the grass and is called back before joy becomes disorder. A horse waits in the stable yard, breathing clouds into cool air. The dog chooses the least socially useful person present and adores them. Leisure, in a Victorian millionaire's life, is never truly empty. It is curated, but curated quiet can still be soothing. As the day declines, appetite returns dressed as ceremony. Evening gathers the house inward again. Lamps are lit, Curtains are drawn. Fires are urged back into brightness. Silver wakes under candlelight. The dining room becomes the center of gravity, a place where food, class, fatigue, and performance all agree to sit at the same table. Dinner in wealthy Victorian life is grand not because it is always joyful, but because it is long. Courses arrive in succession. Plates are removed with a skill approaching choreography. Wines change. Conversation shifts. Candles lower the room into kindness while forcing everyone to remain visible. The table itself glows. Glass catches points of fire. White cloth brightens hands and china. The air smells of warm dishes, flowers, wax, and the faintly serious scent of a room designed for important digestion. Soup gives way to fish. Fish to meat, meat to side dishes to sweets, sweets to fruit, cheese, or whatever other conclusion the age believed appetite required. The wealthy do not eat quickly, because speed suggests hunger, and hunger, if too obvious, suggests need. So one must pace oneself through abundance and remain conversational while doing so. This can be surprisingly tiring. That tiredness is one of the soft revelations of the evening. Refinement wears the body down in small, polite ways. One sits straight, one follows the sequence, one pays attention. One remembers names, obligations, seating, stories already told, and stories better left untold. Yet because all of this happens by candlelight in a room full of textiles and gleaming surfaces, exhaustion itself becomes part of the atmosphere. The rich are often most drowsily human at the end of dinner. Afterward the company redistributes again. Perhaps the ladies move to another room for coffee. Perhaps the gentlemen linger over port. Though customs vary and households change across the long Victorian decades. Eventually music appears. A piano opens. A young woman with sufficient breeding and insufficient choice takes her place on the stool. Someone sings. Someone turns pages. Someone proposes cards. Someone else, with the look of a person who would rather be horizontal, pretends this is exactly how they hope to spend the evening. The parlor fills with those entertainments that existed before screens, and after dinner, which is to say entertainments powered largely by furniture and obligation. And yet, there is genuine sweetness in such hours if you listen below the effort. The piano warms the room. A fire answers with its own crackling accompaniment. Lamps create islands of glow across tables and carpets. Card game gives hands something to do while conversation thins. Needlework keeps eyes lowered. A poem or reading, if handled gently, folds words into the night without demanding too much of them. Even boredom, in the right upholstered chair, can be luxurious. Eventually, the city house begins to feel too enclosed, too mannered, and the imagination drifts outward to the country estate, that great rural extension of wealth. To own a large townhouse is one thing. To own land enough that breakfast can feel geographically remote from the gate is another. The country house presents upper-class life in its broadest, sleepiest scale. A carriage rolls over gravel. Trees gather around the drive. The house appears through mist, rain or pale sun, broad and self-assured, with windows enough to suggest that domestic life has grown almost architectural in its ambitions. Inside, the country house is more spacious, more echoing, and often less comfortable in the modern sense than town life. There are more rooms to heat, more corridors to lose oneself in, more stairs between usefulness and ceremony. Libraries smell of leather, dust, and old certainty. Guest rooms are generous and slightly cold. Portraits keep stern company over landings and halls. One can feel the age of the building in the floors, in the paneling, in the way certain doors seem to prefer one century to another. The grandeur is real, but so is the draft. Morning in the country tastes of distance. The window may look over lawn, trees, fields, gardens, stables, or water. Mist hangs where town smoke would have been. Dogs bark in the yard. Somewhere a groom is already moving about the stables. Somewhere, the kitchen is farther away than breakfast would ideally prefer. The family spreads through the house more loosely here, and that looseness can be restful. A person may read by a library window, wander the grounds, inspect roses, visit the conservatory, or become lost on the way to a room he himself owns. The country house flatters wealth by making it feel like weather. There are weekend guests, of course, with all the social obligation that implies. Shooting parties in season, walks after rain, carriages out, horses in, boots drying in rows, hats on pegs, games after tea. The Victorians enjoyed the countryside, not because it removed performance, but because it changed its scenery. One could look more robust in the country, more hearty, more naturally connected to land, while still being served by enough people to ensure that one's robustness never became too inconvenient. But the country house holds another truth too, a quieter one. Space at this scale can feel lonely. The house is full of echoes, of family history, of old furniture, of inherited portraits, of expectations layered into architecture. At dusk, in a corridor with one lamp burning, and the rest of the house listening to itself, even a millionaire may feel small. Wealth can widen a person's rooms. It does not necessarily settle the heart inside them. That, is why so many country house images feel dreamy and faintly melancholy at once. Grandeur and solitude make excellent neighbors back in town. The later Victorian decades bring technology into the mansion in hesitant waves. Bell pulls, speaking tubes, improved stoves, water closets, gaslight, and other mechanical conveniences begin to insinuate themselves into households that are already dense with ritual. The family admires them. Visitors are shown them. Servants learn to manage them. The devices promise efficiency. But what they mostly do is change the shape of dependence. A bell saves a walk because it sends another body moving. Gaslight extends the evening because someone must maintain the fittings. Plumbing civilizes discomfort because someone else must face its temper. This is the cleverness and the comedy of Victorian modernity. Progress arrives, but not alone. It drags responsibility behind it like a skirt through wet weather. The millionaire gets the polished brass and the improved flush and the respectable thrill of being up to date. The household gets extra layers of vigilance. Somewhere a maid learns a new system. Somewhere a footman curses a new mechanism in silence. Somewhere a plumber is summoned with the air of a man invited into aristocratic society, only because disaster has forced the issue. And then there is charity, the moral furniture of wealth. The rich Victorian lives in sight of poverty, whether he likes it or not. London streets, industrial districts, rural hardship, cold winters, crowded neighborhoods, visible labor, children in need, widows, unemployed men, families living one bad season away from disaster. Even when carriage windows and drawing room curtains soften the view, the fact remains. Great comfort in the 19th century does not exist in a vacuum. It exists beside want. It often exists because of it, so charity becomes both duty and performance. Bazaars, church collections, coal funds, hospital committees, school subscriptions, relief drives, baskets delivered, donations listed, names printed, benevolence organized into respectable occasions. Some of it is sincere. Some of it is strategic. Much of it is both. The wealthy wish to help, certainly, but they also wish to be the sort of people who are seen helping. This is not hypocrisy in every case. It is simply how class, conscience, and public image braid themselves together. A gift can warm a poor household and polish a rich name at the same time. At its best, charity softens the harder edges of class feeling. At its worst, it turns suffering into one more theater of self-presentation. Most real life falls somewhere between. A family attends the parish event. A donation is made. A speech is given. A basket is sent. A schoolroom is funded. A pew remains occupied. The poor are not forgotten. Exactly, but neither are they invited into equality. Victorian society was very good at organizing sympathy without threatening hierarchy. By now the long day has deepened into evening again, and with evening comes one of the upper world's oldest anxieties, reputation. Money can build rooms, staff them, decorate them, warm them, and fill them with dinner guests. But reputation decides how those rooms are interpreted by others. A badly judged marriage, a debt, a whisper, a reckless son, a reckless daughter, an unfortunate gambling habit, a servant with stories, a social slight remembered too loudly. Any of these can travel farther than a carriage and stay more deeply than soot. The higher a family rises, the more carefully it must manage the narrative of its own inevitability. This management takes countless forms: portraits commissioned, letters sent, misunderstandings rephrased, a daughter quietly taken abroad for a season, a son quietly placed elsewhere, a scandal softened into a joke buried under a charitable act, a guest list adjusted, a friendship cooled, a story repeated at dinner until it becomes the approved family version of events. The rich do not only own objects, they own explanations, or at least they try to. Photography and the press complicate this in the later century. Now, the family may not only be talked about, but pictured. A public appearance can travel beyond memory into image. A charity event may become print, a railway opening, a fashionable wedding, a celebrated dinner. All can enlarge a household's public self beyond the walls that once contained it. Wealth adapts by becoming even more conscious of surfaces. The dining room is no longer only for guests, it is also for how guests will later describe it. Still, let us not end among whispers. Let us return, gently, to the body and the house at rest. Night in a Victorian mansion strips away some of the day's confidence. Guests have gone, letters are done, lamps are lower, carpets absorb the last of the footsteps. Somewhere below stairs the final tray is cleared and stacked. Someone checks bolts, someone banks the fires, someone carries candles along a corridor where portraits recede into shadow. The house, which all day performed importance, now begins to admit weariness. Bedrooms reassert themselves. Clothes are removed layer by layer. Jewelry comes off. Cuffs are undone. Pins are drawn out. Boots are set outside doors or taken away to be seen to by others. Hair is brushed 100 patient strokes. Water in the basin reflects a small wavering flame. Curtains are tested against the draft. A prayer may be said. A book may be opened, and then surrendered to sleep before the page is finished. The body that spent the day being dressed for society begins the quieter work of becoming merely human again. This is one of the most comforting truths in the whole rich Victorian world. For all the ceremony, all the silver, all the staff, all the land, all the carriages, all the dinners, all the callers, all the calculations, the day still ends with a person taking off a collar, lowering into bed, and hoping for rest. Wealth can cushion exhaustion, but it cannot abolish it. In some ways, it may even increase it, layering every ordinary hour with additional performance. To be rich in that age is to be buffered from hardship, and yet surrounded by expectation. One is softened by luxury and sharpened by display. So as the fire settles and the room darkens, let the whole house gather itself behind you one last time. The breakfast room with its cool toast and quiet hierarchy, the nursery with its toys and lessons, the garden path, the drawing room tea, the writing desk, the dining table under candles, the distant country drive, the bell pull, the gas lamp, the church committee, the portrait gallery, the soft pressure of all those repeated little duties that made upper-class life look so effortless from a distance. Let them recede now, not into judgment, but into atmosphere. There is, perhaps, a final kindness in leaving the Victorians this way, not as cartoons of excess, though they often invited caricature, not as villains pure and simple, though their comforts rested unequally on other lives, not as creatures wholly unlike us, but as people who tried, in their own arranged and unequal world, to soften existence with beauty, order, warmth, routine, and a room prepared before they entered it. Their methods were heavy with class and custom, their comforts were not evenly shared, yet the human wish beneath them remains familiar, to be warm, to be looked after, to be spared a little friction, to feel, if only for a few hours, that the day has been structured gently enough for sleep. And now, you do not need the house to keep working for you any longer. You do not need to maintain the surface. Answer the invitation. Judge the hem. Sign the letter. Remember the title. Greet the caller. Or worry which room the tray should enter first. You can leave the silver where it is. You can leave the curtains drawn. You can leave the household to its own midnight breathing. Somewhere in that great Victorian mansion, a clock continues without asking you to count the hours. Somewhere a coal glows once and settles. Somewhere a maid on the upper floor has finished her final task. Somewhere a butler has closed the ledger of the day. Somewhere a millionaire, no longer observed by guests or family or servants or portrait painters, is only a sleeping shape beneath blankets in a darkened room. Keep only the softest things if you like. The tea, steam, the brush on cloth, the quiet corridor, the warmth of the fire nearest the bed, the dog asleep by the chair, the distant garden after rain, the carriage blanket over your knees, the candle lowered in the hall, the silver tray waiting at dawn. Let the rest fade into wallpaper, into soot, into old wood, into the half-lit memory of a house too large to explain in one night. Let history grow quiet around you. Let the room grow softer. Let the century remain where it is, and let yourself drift out of it as lightly as a lamp being shaded, as quietly as a door drawn almost, but not quite shut.